The city of Darkmire was unlocked yesterday, and while it might not have given us a new boss to farm, it sure gave us something else. Patrolling the new city are Vyrewatch Sentinels, an elite version of the Vyrewatch that made Mireditch so awful. We thought that farming these Sentinels looked incredibly interesting for a lot of reasons, so we sat down and grinded it out on day 1. 1,000 Vyrewatch Sentinels killed, catalogued, and presented for your entertainment. Let's go. The setup we went with here was a fairly average one. I didn't want to make the grind seem too unrealistic or inaccessible, and most people who complete the Sins of the Father quests probably have gear similar to this, or better. You'll generally want to prioritize strength bonus here. Unsurprisingly, bigger hits means more kills per hour. If you wanted to upgrade this setup's damage, you could add a Bandos chestplate and tassets, ferocious gloves, a Nate is not face guard, an Avernic defender, and an infernal cape, which I'm totally gonna get, real soon. Sentinels have 150 HP and 0 defense, so accuracy isn't as useful here as it might be elsewhere. It's important never to forget that they can only be damaged with the Blisterwood Flail, the weapon that you built during the quest, so you won't have any freedom with your main hand. Don't worry about defense here. Lucky for us, Vyrewatch only attack with melee, and we can easily prey against 100% of their damage. They do hit very high and very accurately, with 135 attack bonus and 150 strength bonus, so you'd have a rough time without protect from melee. This is where Jagex was really nice to us. There's a statue just south of the bank that works as an altar, allowing you to restore all prayer at the cost of 1 to 3 hit points. I was curious how much health this did cost, so I used the altar 100 times in a row, marked every instance of damage, and put it into a spreadsheet. Although 2 and 3 damage were slightly more common, it's a lot closer to a random distribution than it is to 20, 40, 40, so I'm gonna call it random. If you see prayer pots in the first clip and think, wow, what an idiot, there's an altar right there. Well, you're right. It took us a while to really notice it, probably because it looks so different to most other altars. Once we started using the altar, it was pretty easy going. You might be thinking, come on dude, it's right there on the wiki, not just the altar but even the damage you take. And to that, I say, it wasn't on the wiki until I put it there. With relatively infinite prayer, this task becomes a breeze. Depending on your prayer bonus, you can go AFK for a few minutes at a time without having to interact with your character. I'm nervous to go too AFK here, considering how rare a blood shard drop is, but you could even consider wearing prayer boosting gear here like Proselyte to make it even easier. Even with general strength gear though, you can easily pray protect from melee constantly, along with rapid heal to counteract the altar's damage. Vampires can be unlocked as a task with the brand new Actual Vampire Slayer reward for 80 points. If you choose to buy it, you can get tasks from Konar, Duradel, Neve or Steve, and Keldar, so you could do it as low as 70 combat. I have no idea how valuable this is of a reward, however, I figured I'd just unlock it for the content. With the location of the altar and the chance at blood shards, it makes sense to do vampire tasks here at Sentinels, and if you wanted quick Slayer XP, you could even pray Piety the entire time as well. You can choose to pray Piety if farming them normally, but it drains your prayer exceptionally fast and makes it a bit less AFK. At the very beginning, everyone was using cannons to farm Sentinels for a chance at a blood shard. You'll see plenty of cannons in some of the earlier footage, but note that Jagex hotfixed this later on day 1 and made them immune to cannons. So far, this is the only way Jagex has trained Sentinels since the release, so other than the cannon, you can expect to see a pretty similar experience. If you don't have an herb sack or a seed box, don't worry. Vyrewatch Sentinels drop very few of these, and over the course of 1,000 kills, we got 1 single Ranarr seed and 2 grimy herbs that were worth picking up. With a bank nearby, those items were even less relevant. In fact, the bank's proximity is incredibly nice here. You will need the Vyre Noble disguise to access it, but it's easy to switch into it to bank and then switch back into your strength gear later to make the Vyrewatch aggressive towards you again. Sentinels drop a ton of alchable items, including adamant plate bodies and plate legs, and rune full helms, kite shields, and daggers, as well as some unnoted rune ores and bars. Expect to see a whole lot of runes, mostly blood, nature, and deaths, along with a few stackable items like noted U logs and rune javelins and arrows. Every Sentinel drops vampire dust as well, which is used in the Hallowed Sepulchre. I honestly have no idea how much these are going to be worth eventually, since it's far too soon to know. We ended up with a good 100 of them over the course of farming, but they didn't seem to be a very appealing drop. Keep an eye on the price though, and if it's worth over 1,000 GP, then it might be very well worth looting and banking. These Vyrewatch have a few other random drops like noted bark and a gem tip drop table, but nothing except for the onyx bolt tips were very worth picking up. You guys don't care about rune javelins, death runes, or vampire dust though, do you? You guys only care about one thing, and it's disgusting. Well, luckily enough, we got a blood shard 648 kills in. The value Jagex set for blood shards on release was 2 million GP, but I'm sure the price will vary wildly over the next few weeks and even months. After the first day, the wiki estimated the drop rate on blood shards to be 1 in 1,500, so we got really lucky here in one way, and very unlucky in another. Did the footage of the drop get messed up and so I only have this clip from afterwards trying to make an Amulet of Blood Fury with the drop in the chat? Yeah, but that's not what I'm upset about. I'm upset because it happened twice. Over the course of 1,000 Vyrewatch Sentinels, we landed 2 blood shards. If you weren't aware, the blood shard can be added to an Amulet of Fury to provide a degradable lifesteal effect. I don't really value it very highly, considering it only has a 10% chance to restore 10% of the damage dealt, which is an incredibly small amount of health, but some others might disagree. If the supply stays low enough and enough people want a bit of health regen for their Slayer tasks, then its value might soar, but I've honestly got no idea. It's almost time for the juiciest bit, but before we look at the bank tab, let's do a little accounting. Over the course of killing 1,000 Vyrewatch Sentinels, it took us about 15 hours, and we gained around 40,000 defense experience per hour, or 600,000 defense experience overall. This amounts to a rate of about 65 to 70 kills per hour, with some fairly average gear and minimal attention paid, which certainly wouldn't be awful for a Slayer task, but it pales in comparison to Nightmare Zone as a melee training method. The biggest issue with training melee on Vyrewatch is the weapon. With the 20% damage boost against vampires, the Blisterwood Flail is barely better than a Dragon Mace, with the same speed and a lower strength bonus. I also want to mention that we saw 10 hard clue drops over the course of the video, which is a bit more frequent than the wiki's listed 1 in 128, but it also means that it'll take almost 2 hours for each hard clue. Now it's time. The final bank check. After 1,000 Vyrewatch Sentinels killed, we got some decent loot. Not only do we have 2 blood shards, but 2.3 mil in cash and alks, over 1,300 blood runes and almost 700 death runes, along with everything else that we mentioned earlier. Throw it all into the price checker and we end up with just over 8 million GP, but we did lose our nature runes in with our existing stack in the bank, so we should really add another 180k here for the around 800 nature runes missing. Runelight tracked the final loot at 8.16 mil, putting each blood shard at about 2 mil GP. Over the course of 15 hours here, we're looking at 550,000 GP per hour, which is pretty nice. We'll have to wait and see how the value of the blood shard goes, but if it stays at or above 2 mil, then this could be a fair AFK activity that combines melee training with some profit. However, at the end of the day, that'll all depend on the demand for an Amulet of Blood Fury. I've seen people in my comments and clan chat express how excited they are for one of these amulets, so I thought I'd explain why I'm not a huge fan. The Amulet of Blood Fury has the same stats as a normal Fury, but with a small perk. Like I said, every successful melee hit has a 10% chance to trigger a 10% heal. This effect will work for 10,000 hits, whether or not the effect activates, meaning it'll heal you 1,000 times before it turns back into a normal Fury. With a 4-tick weapon like an Abyssal Whip, you'll attack every 2.4 seconds, meaning it'll take about 6 hours and 40 minutes of sustained combat to go through a whole shard, and at the current cost of 2 million GP, it'll cost 5,000 GP a minute to use. But Disciple, stop reading the wiki to us, we can all see that. Hey, that's just because I'm still writing it. With standard strength gear and a whip against an enemy with 0 defense, I used the DPS calculator to get an average damage per second of 5.5, or 330 damage per minute. With an effective 1% lifesteal, this gives 3.3 health per minute. Compare this to the base health regen of 1 per minute, or the 4 per minute you get when using a regen bracelet in combination with Praying Rapid Heal. This doesn't look that great. 3.3 health per minute is on the high end as well, considering most monsters have some defense level. However, you could also get that number all the way up to 4.3 health per minute while on task with a Slayer Helm, max strength gear, and a Garazi Rapier. Looking at the numbers, I'm sure it's not shocking why I don't think the Blood Fury will replace the Torture in most instances, but if you think you've got a great use for it, then please let me know and I'll test it out myself. We could also find out that enough of the community feels the same way I do, and Jagex buffs the amulet in the future, increasing its value later on. Anyway, I've been single-handedly tanking the value of blood shards enough for one video. Thank you for watching, remember that I love you, and don't forget why you just walked into the other room.
To speed up truth, we had a promise made, no hands and then no way, we'll eyes are blade, took off